Welcome back. We are now on to part 2 of our second unit. Okay, so we just finished up talking about cells. Today we're going to be talking about biomolecules. Now I know you might be wondering, what the heck is a biomolecule? And I'm here to tell you. So if we break that word down, it really has two sections, bio and molecules. So when we look at the word bio, whenever you see that prefix in front of a word, it's going to be talking about life or living things. The second part of that word biomolecules is the word molecule. And when we talk about molecules, we're talking about just compounds or substances. So when we talk about biomolecules, we're really just talking about compounds found in living things. Okay, compounds found in living things. So today's aim is how do cells use chemical compounds to maintain homeostasis? There are a few things I want you to pick out of that sentence. The first thing being chemical compounds. Now, this is just a fancy way of saying biomolecules. So chemical compounds is the same thing in this case as biomolecules. And the next word is my favorite word, homeostasis. I told you guys you're going to see this word a lot this year, and I was not exaggerating. So if you remember from one of our last videos, I told you that homeostasis means a stable internal environment. So today's aim is how do cells use biomolecules to maintain a stable internal environment? Let's find out. So today's do now. Name the 3 organelles a plant cell has that an animal cell does not. So go ahead and pause this video, answer that question, and then press play when you're ready to go over it. All right, name 3 organelles a plant cell has. Ooh, that is ugly. Plant cell has that an animal cell does not. The first one is a chloroplast. So plant cells have chloroplasts and animal cells do not. What is the chloroplast in charge of? What's its function? Well, you should know that a chloroplast carries out photosynthesis. And when we talk about photosynthesis, we're talking about the process by which a plant turns sunlight into food. And specifically, what type of food? Well, unfortunately, the plant is not making cheeseburgers inside of its cells, okay? It's actually making food in the form of glucose or sugar, which we're actually going to talk about today. All right, the second organelle a plant cell has that an animal cell does not is a cell wall. Now, keep in mind that the cell membrane, or plant cells and animal cells both have cell membranes, but the cell wall is only found in plant cells. And what that cell wall does is it gives that plant cell a rigid structure or support. So it provides that tough exterior for those plant cells. It makes it super rigid. It's actually made out of starch. And the third organelle that a plant cell has that an animal cell does not. I know you might be wondering, Ms. Collins, I thought there were only 2 organelles that a plant cell has that an animal cell doesn't. And you're right, but I do want you guys to make note of the large vacuole. So keep in mind that animal cells do have vacuoles, but theirs look much different than the ones we see in animal cells, or in plant cells. I'm getting mixed up here. So if you remember the picture that I showed you guys of the plant cell, we saw that the large vacuole took up a big portion of that plant cell, right? It took up almost half of that entire cell. So that large vacuole is in charge of storage. So it stores things inside the cell, namely water, food, and waste. But in the case of our large vacuole, it's going to be filled with mostly water. So I'll go ahead and color this in blue so you know it's filled with mostly water. And that's what allows those plants to maintain their shape. and stand upright. That's why when you forget to water a plant, it might start to droop because those vacuoles aren't filled with water anymore. But the second you give it water, it'll start to perk back up because the vacuoles are in charge of storing water. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to part A, the chemistry of cells. Now you might be saying, Miss, I signed up for a living environment. I am not in chemistry. I don't know what that is. And I promise you, you're going to be fine. We're just going to be talking about the bare minimum of chemistry that you need to understand in order to understand living environment. And I'm going to walk you through every step of the way. Okay, so we've got a passage that you guys are going to read. I'm going to read it with you. Then we're going to use the information we see in this passage to answer questions 1 through 8. And then we're done. All right, so as you read through this passage, make sure you are annotating. So highlighting important information, making note of any connections you can make from previous units. Just make sure you're actively reading instead of passively. So let's get started. All right, so carbohydrates are organic compounds made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms in the proportion of 1 to 2 to 1. Carbohydrates are a key source of energy, and they are found in most foods, especially fruits, vegetables, and grains. The building blocks of carbohydrates are simple or single sugars called monosaccharides, such as glucose, which has the formula C6H12O6, and fructose. Glucose is a major source of energy in cells. Disaccharides are double sugars formed when 2 monosaccharides are joined together. For example, sucrose, or common table sugar, consists of glucose and fructose. Polysaccharides are chains of 3 or more monosaccharides. A polysaccharide is an example of a macromolecule, a large molecule made up of many smaller molecules. Now, I know you might be wondering, what the heck did I just read? That was so many large words, and it was, but we're here to break every single one of those words down, and I guarantee by the end of this video, you are going to be a master on all of those words. So let's do it. Question number 1 says, what elements form an organic compound classified as a carbohydrate? So if we look at sentence number 1, we see that carbohydrates are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms in the proportion of 1 to 2 to 1. So the 3 elements that form that organic compound, carbohydrates, are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Now, it's super important that you remember this ratio of 1 to 2 to 1. That means that for every carbon, 1 carbon molecule or atom, you're going to have 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. So I'm going to write that down. Let's see, 1 to 2 to 1, CHO. Now, just because we say it's a ratio of 1 to 2 to 1 doesn't mean that it will always be exactly 1, 2, and 1. It could be any multiplication variant of that ratio. So for example, we were given the example of glucose, which is 6, 12, 6. But if you break that down or simplify it, it's still in that ratio of 1 to 2 to 1. So it can be in any multiplication of that ratio. It could be 1 to 2 to 1, it could be 2 to 4 to, or 2 to 4 to 2, as long as it follows that ratio of 1 carbon, 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. So that's super, super important to remember. All right, number 2, what does the 2 represent in the proportion given in sentence 1? So we're told 1 to 2 to 1 is that proportion. That 2 represents 2 atoms of hydrogen. Because remember, we have 1 atom of carbon, 2 atoms of hydrogen, 1 atom of oxygen. So the 2 represents hydrogen. Number 3, what 3 food groups are good sources of carbohydrates? So if you look in sentence 2, we're told that carbohydrates are a key source of energy found in foods like fruits, vegetables, and grains. So what 3 food groups are a good source of carbs? Fruits, vegetables, and grains. Number 4, the prefix mono means 1. What word in sentence 3 contains this prefix, and what is the meaning of this word? So if we go to sentence 3, I see that there's a word called monosaccharides. And we're told that the word mono means one. And I'll go ahead and tell you that saccharides means sugar. So if we break that word monosaccharides down, it just means one sugar. All right, and we even see that these are called simple or single sugars, right? So monosaccharides equals one sugar. So this is going to be one sugar molecule. So if we represent that as a picture, it would just be one beautiful little molecule of sugar, just one. Beautiful. All right, moving on to number 5. What chemical formula is given in sentence 3? How many atoms are in a molecule of this compound? So sentence 3, we are given the formula for glucose, which I already told you guys. So glucose, I can't write. The formula is C6H12O6. You guys will need to know that, so make sure you practice with that. All right, and how many atoms are in a molecule of this compound? Well, we're going to add up 6 plus 12 plus 6. Go ahead and get your calculators out or do it in your head, because 6 plus 12 plus 6 equals 24. So there are 24 atoms in that compound. Okay. Number 6, the prefix di means two. What term in sentence 5 contains this prefix? What is the meaning of this term? So let's go up to sentence 5, and we see that disaccharides are double sugars formed when two monosaccharides are joined together. So we know that di equals 2, and once again, I already told you that saccharides means sugar. So in this case, disaccharides equals 2 sugars. So it's a compound with 2 sugars. And if we drew that as a picture, we would have 2 sugar molecules bound together. Number 7, in sentence 6, which 2 monosaccharides join to form table sugar? So let's look up sentence 6. And we're told that sucrose, or common table sugar, consists of glucose and fructose. So the 2 monosaccharides that join together are glucose and fructose. All right, and finally, number 8, the prefix poly means more than one. What term in sentence 7 contains this prefix? So if we go up, we'll find polysaccharide is an example of a macromolecule, a large molecule made up of many smaller molecules. So the last word that you guys need to write down is polysaccharide. Poly equals more than one. It also just means many. And once again, saccharides equals sugar. So polysaccharides equals many sugars. This is going to be a chain of sugars. All right, so if we were to draw a picture of that, it would be a long chain of sugar molecules. So it's a super complex structure. It's a large molecule. And an example of this polysaccharide is going to be something called starch. Okay, so starch is a macromolecule. It's a large, complex molecule. And starch is going to come up, it's going to be pretty important in some labs that we do in the upcoming future. So starch is a macromolecule, it's a polysaccharide, it's a long complex chain, but di and monosaccharides are much smaller molecules, right? We drew that our monosaccharides are just one sugar, it's just that single circular structure. Disaccharides are two sugars, so two of those monosaccharides put together, and polysaccharides are going to be long chains of sugars. So we've got a bunch of different monosaccharides bound together. And these are huge, so very, very large structures. All right, I believe that that's all we have to go over today. So next up, you know what to do. Click on the exit ticket. I'm gonna open that link. Fill out this exit ticket, press submit, and have a wonderful afternoon. I'll see you guys soon.